A German shepherd was found amidst the ruins of an abandoned property, his body frail, his spirit fractured. So deeply traumatized, he recoiled from every human attempt at contact. For countless weeks, he remained curled tightly in the farthest corner of his kennel, silent and unmoving, while potential adopters passed by without a second glance. Yet everything changed the day one unexpected visitor crossed the threshold of the shelter, setting into motion a chain of events no one on staff could have predicted. What unfolded was a story that would forever redefine the profound, often miraculous connection between dogs and people. In July 2021, the Riverside County Animal Shelter in California was buckling under the weight of the ongoing crisis. The wave of pet surrenders during the pandemic had overwhelmed the already stretched-thin facility. For shelter director Marlene Gutierrez, a seasoned expert with 2 decades in animal welfare, the appearance of yet another case felt like a drop in an already overflowing bucket. "We have no room left," she said wearily to Animal Control Officer Luis Vasquez, as he carried in a crate that looked too heavy for its fragile occupant. "There are already 15 names on the euthanasia list for this week alone." Luis lowered the crate gently and shook his head. "You'll want to make room for this one, Marlene. Foreclosure in Indio. Judging by the condition of the place, the owner vanished months ago." Inside the crate lay a skeletal German shepherd, no older than 3 years, barely hanging on to life. He had endured his desolation by drinking from a cracked garden hose and scavenging for scraps in the overgrown yard that had become his prison. The collar around his neck had dug into his skin as he grew, eventually embedding itself and requiring urgent surgical intervention. Dr. Caitlin Chen, the shelter's lead veterinarian, meticulously documented his condition. The list was harrowing: extreme malnutrition, registering a body condition score of 2 out of 9, severe dehydration necessitating intravenous fluids, multiple untreated wounds, a heavy infestation of hookworms, ear infections, and pressure sores from lying on hard ground for far too long. "Physically, we can heal him," Dr. Chen reported to Marlene after completing his emergency treatment. "But psychologically, I am deeply concerned. His fear responses are unlike anything we usually see. Unlike many abused animals who still seek out comfort and kindness from humans, this shepherd, whom the veterinary team had temporarily named Shadow, was different. He reacted to human presence with utter panic. Any attempt to approach him in his kennel sent him retreating to the furthest corner, his body shaking uncontrollably. He would not meet anyone's gaze, would not venture forward for food, and stiffened with fear at the sight of a leash. "He is not just frightened, he is completely shut down," noted Kelsey Martinez, the shelter's behavioral specialist, after multiple failed attempts to make contact. Despite the team's best efforts, 2 weeks went by with no progress. Shadow only ate when the shelter was empty, and the security cameras showed him moving only during the quietest hours of the night, pacing in tight, agitated circles under the cover of silence. "We are out of time," Marlene confessed to her staff during an early August meeting. "If we cannot find a rescue organization to take him by Friday, we may have no choice but to make an impossible decision." Then came Thursday. Kelsey made one final attempt to reach him, but this time she changed her approach. Instead of approaching his kennel, she simply settled herself on the floor across the corridor. Her back rested against the wall. She began reading aloud from a paperback novel, her voice soft and steady, never directly addressing him. She stayed like that for nearly an hour, present, calm, and completely non-threatening. When she finally stood to leave, something made her pause. Shadow remained in his corner, but his amber eyes were now following her movements, their gazes locked, briefly, quietly, but meaningfully. It was the first time he had willingly acknowledged another human being since his arrival. "I need 48 more hours," she said with urgency in her voice, turning to Marlene. "There is still someone in there. I know it." Marlene hesitated but agreed. Neither of them could have imagined that the very next morning, everything would change. Claire Winslow had not intended to visit the shelter that day. At 34, she was rebuilding her life after a difficult divorce, working full-time as a physical therapist at Eisenhower Medical Center, and settling into a modest rental cottage in Palm Desert. Getting a dog was the last thing on her mind. "I'm just dropping off some old blankets and towels," she explained to the volunteer at the front desk. "My mom used to volunteer here years ago." Mike Russell, the weekend supervisor, happened to overhear her. "Thanks so much for the donation. Would you like a quick tour? We have made quite a few upgrades since your mom's time." Claire considered it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Sure, I have a few minutes." The tour took her through the bright, renovated adoption wing. Happy barks echoed as lively puppies and affectionate adult dogs eagerly approached their kennel doors, wagging their tails in search of attention. Claire offered soft greetings and kind words, but none of them stirred something deep inside her. Not yet. "That's the majority of our adoption-ready pets," Mike said as they neared a quieter hallway. "Beyond this point, we house our medical and behaviorally challenged cases, dogs that are not quite ready for the adoption floor." "Do you mind if we take a peek anyway?" Claire asked. "My mom always had a soft spot for the hard-to-place ones." Mike paused. "Sure, but please keep your distance from the kennel doors. Some of these dogs are still working through serious trauma." As they walked through the dimmer section, Mike offered brief summaries. A dog recovering from a broken leg, another undergoing treatment for heartworm, a pair of underweight puppies slowly gaining strength. Then they reached the last kennel. "This is our toughest case," Mike said in a quiet voice. "German Shepherd, about 3 years old. Found abandoned and starved. He has been with us nearly 3 weeks and still will not leave that corner. We are hoping a rescue group will take him and provide the level of care he needs." Claire stopped. Something in that kennel reached out to her, deeper than anything she had felt during the tour. In the shadowed corner, the shepherd lay curled against the wall, his eyes watching, cautious, wounded, but still flickering with life. "What is his story?" she asked. "We don't know much," Mike said gently. "We suspect long-term abuse and severe neglect. He has never shown any aggression, just paralyzing fear. The most worrying thing is his complete emotional withdrawal. He does not interact with anyone." Claire did not respond. She simply sat down on the floor, cross-legged, positioning herself with her back against the opposite wall, exactly as Kelsey had the day before. Though she did not yet know it, she said nothing. She just sat and waited. Kelsey had taken the exact same position just the day before. "What are you doing?" Mike asked, a mixture of surprise and curiosity in his voice. "I'm not entirely sure," Claire admitted, her gaze still fixed on the trembling shepherd. "Just giving him space, letting him know I'm here without asking anything of him." She looked up at Mike, her voice quiet but sure. "Do you mind if I just sit here for a few minutes?" Mike glanced at his watch. "I need to help with the med rounds, but I'll swing back in 15. Claire gave a soft nod, barely shifting her posture as he walked away. Alone now, she sat in silence. No coaxing words, no reaching hands, just stillness. Occasionally she glanced at her phone, but mostly she just existed there, a quiet presence in a world Shadow had learned to fear. 10 minutes passed. Shadow hadn't moved. He remained pressed into the corner like stone carved from sorrow. But something had shifted, not visibly, not to the untrained eye, but Claire saw it, a subtle loosening of the muscles around his shoulders, a fractional shift in weight. He wasn't approaching, but he wasn't locked in terror either. It was the first crack in a wall long fortified by fear. When Mike returned, Claire hadn't moved. "Any change?" he whispered, careful not to break the quiet spell. "Not really," she replied softly, "but I'd like to come back tomorrow, if that's okay." Mike looked genuinely surprised. You're welcome to. Just these kinds of cases, they don't change overnight. It can take months of work, and even then, I understand, Claire said, rising to her feet, brushing the dust from her jeans. I just feel like I should come back. As she turned to leave, she stole one last glance at the kennel. Shadow hadn't moved from his spot, but his eyes tracked her with something different. Not just fear, not just caution, curiosity, fragile, flickering curiosity. Claire couldn't explain what drew her to him. It wasn't sympathy, and it wasn't just the sorrow etched into his form. It was something deeper. Recognition. Something ancient and inexplicable in the way his eyes met hers. As if two souls long lost had found themselves again in that sterile shelter hallway. The next morning she was back, this time just as the shelter doors opened. She came prepared, a folding camp chair, a paperback novel, and a small Bluetooth speaker playing soft classical music. Tools she often used with her most anxious physical therapy patients. Familiar rhythms, gentle structure, anchors in a world that had slipped into chaos. Kelsey met her at the front desk. I wasn't sure you'd come back, she said with a half smile. Honestly, Claire replied, I wasn't either. But I couldn't stop thinking about him last night. Back at the kennel, Shadow remained in his usual spot. But the moment Claire came into view, his ears perked forward, slightly cautiously, a gesture so minor it could have been missed. But Kelsey's trained eyes caught it. He remembers you, she said quietly, impressed. That's unusual, really unusual. Claire nodded, not saying a word. She set up her chair 6 feet from the kennel, deliberately placing it at an angle. Not a threat, not a confrontation. She placed the speaker beside her and let the music drift gently through the air like mist. Do you mind if I just sit with him again? She asked. Of course, Kelsey said. I'll check in now and then. Just remember, no sudden movements, no direct eye contact, and please don't try to enter the kennel without staff. For the next 3 hours, Claire simply was. She read aloud now and then, her voice soft and steady. At times, she tapped away on her laptop, quietly updating patient notes. She made no effort to engage, never even looked directly at him. But she felt him, always just beyond her periphery, always watching. Around noon, Kelsey returned with a sandwich. Any changes? Claire nodded slightly. He moved about an hour ago, came to the middle of the kennel, watches me, but he retreats when others pass by. Peeking into the kennel, Kelsey saw it for herself. Shadow was closer, closer than he'd ever come voluntarily. She swallowed her excitement. That's incredible. After Kelsey left, Claire continued reading softly. Sometimes she talked to Shadow as if he were an old friend. About her, morning, the book in her hands, the clouds drifting outside. She never tried to make him respond. She was just there, inviting him into her rhythm, her peace. Then just past 2 p.m., something extraordinary happened. Sure, she had been reading silently for nearly 30 minutes when she sensed movement. Subtle, quiet. She glanced up without turning her head, catching it only through the edges of her vision. Shadow had come forward, not close, not yet, but he was standing at the front of the kennel, his gaze fixed on her, not with fear, but with something deeper, something wondering, something beginning to trust. Claire's breath caught. Slowly, ever so slowly, she shifted her chair a few inches closer. Shadow didn't move. She began reading again, her voice a soft, steady current in the quiet. When Marlene came down the hall and spotted the scene, she froze mid-step. He's never come that far from the corner, she whispered, eyes wide. What did she do? Nothing, Kelsey said. Her voice was laced with awe. That's what's so remarkable. She didn't do anything. She just waited. That evening, as Claire packed up to leave, she asked if she could return again the next day. Absolutely, Marlene said without hesitation. I'm updating his status in our system right now. No decisions are being made about his future until we see where this goes. As Claire turned to go, Shadow slowly returned to his corner, but not with panic. There was intention in the way he moved, and just before she disappeared down the hall, their eyes met. I'll see you tomorrow, she said softly. What no one knew, not yet, was that Shadow's reaction to Claire wasn't coincidence. There was a reason her presence soothed him, a reason her voice pierced the fog that had locked him away. A bond had begun to form, ancient and unspoken, and it was only the beginning. Shadow stood at the far end of the meet and greet room, the soft overhead lights casting a faint glow on his black and tan coat. He didn't notice them at first. His focus was fixed on the worn, squeaky toy Claire had brought, the Aaron, HRU, Uek, day before, a rare object of interest in his otherwise withdrawn world. Jordan sat silently in his wheelchair, hands clenched tightly on his knees, eyes fixed on the dog he dared not hope for. Claire stood behind him, a silent pillar of support. Kelsey hovered near the door, tense but ready to intervene if necessary. Then, as if sensing a shift in the air, Shadow lifted his head. His eyes found Jordan. Everything stopped. Shadow's entire body stilled. His ears perked forward, rigid. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in a kind of stunned recognition. He took a single hesitant step forward, then froze again, his nose twitching rapidly as he tried to make sense of what his senses were telling him. Jordan leaned forward slightly in his chair. His voice came out rough, unsteady. Shadow. The dog blinked, and then, just like that, his demeanor changed. A soft, almost broken whimper escaped from his throat. His tail, long held low and motionless, gave a single uncertain wag. He took another step forward, then another, each one a fragile bridge between doubt and memory. Jordan's breath caught in his throat. He lowered his hands slowly, palms open, trembling. "It's me, buddy," he whispered. "It's Ryan." At that name, spoken in that familiar cadence, Shadow's posture cracked. He surged forward the last few feet with a suddenness that made Claire gasp. But there was no aggression in the movement, only longing, only hope, only the raw echo of something lost. He buried his head in Jordan's lap with a sound that was neither a bark nor a cry, just a soft, soul-deep moan of recognition. His body quaked against Jordan's knees. Jordan bent over him, arms sliding around the dog's neck. He pressed his forehead to Shadow's and held him, eyes squeezed shut, his breath hitching as he fought the wave of emotion threatening to crush him. "Oh my God," he choked. "I thought you were gone. I thought you were dead." Shadow whimpered again and licked the man's wrist, a silent reply that said everything. No one in the room spoke. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. Kelsey brought a hand to her mouth, her own expression stunned. After what felt like forever, Jordan looked up, his face wet with tears, his hands still resting on the dog who had once been more than a partner, who had been his lifeline in a war zone, and the ghost that haunted his dreams since. "I searched for him," he said softly, voice raw. "I begged them to let me go back and find him. They said he was gone, that he'd run off after the blast. I never stopped wondering, never stopped feeling like I'd failed him." Claire crouched beside them, her voice gentle. "Maybe he was looking for you, too." Jordan gave a half laugh, half sob. "I can't believe this is real." Kelsey, still watching from the doorway, finally stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, careful not to disrupt the fragile magic unfolding before her. This is the kind of reunion we don't see. Ever. I don't even know what to say." Claire looked at her. "What do we have to do to make this official?" Kelsey blinked, then nodded slowly. Marlene will need to approve it, and the director will have to sign off, but after this, after what we just saw, there's no question. This isn't just any dog. This is his dog. Shadow was now seated firmly beside Jordan's chair, his body pressed close, tail resting against the floor, eyes no longer haunted but focused, alert, alive. And as Jordan reached down to stroke the familiar scar on Shadow's right shoulder, the one no one else could have described, Claire knew without a doubt. Some bonds don't break, not with distance, not with time, not even with trauma. This was one of them. Then Jordan spoke a single word, firm, commanding, and utterly unlike the quiet tone he had used all session. Attention. Shadow's response was immediate. His head snapped up. Ears locked forward. His body froze as though struck by an invisible force. Every muscle engaged. Eyes locked on Jordan. He did not move except for the frantic twitching of his nose, as if the scent reaching him had triggered a memory buried too deep for words. Jordan swallowed hard. Shadow? Come. His voice cracked on the second word, emotions tightening around his throat like a vice. And then, it happened. The dog who had hidden in corners, who flinched from every human touch, who had remained unreachable for weeks, ran. With a sudden burst of energy that made Kelsey gasp out loud, Shadow launched himself across the room. Gone was the trembling, wary creature they had all tiptoed around. In his place was a soldier reunited with his brother in arms. Shadow nearly knocked over Jordan's wheelchair as he threw his weight into him, whimpering, licking, pressing his body as close as he could. Jordan wrapped his arms around him, burying his face in Shadow's thick fur, his shoulders shaking with silent, uncontrollable sobs. The room was absolutely still, the air heavy with the gravity of the moment. I think that answers the question, Kelsey whispered, voice choked with tears as she looked at Claire. Claire could only nod, wiping at her eyes. The mystery of how a military working dog from a war zone in Afghanistan had ended up in a county shelter in California would never be fully solved. But through Jordan's VA contacts and the military's working dog program, they pieced together part of the story. Shadow military designation, Teeth 167, nicknamed Shadow by Jordan for the way he always stayed close, had indeed survived the IED blast. Injured but alive, he had been transported back to the United States, rehabilitated at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. But the trauma he carried had changed him. Deemed unsuitable for further military service, he was adopted out through a private organization that placed retired dogs with civilian homes. From there, the trail grew cold. Maybe he was passed between households. Maybe he ended up with someone who could not understand his specific needs. One day, somehow, he had been abandoned, left to face the world alone. But now none of that mattered. Shadow had found his person again. The reunion, while miraculous, brought with it new challenges. Jordan still lived alone, still navigated daily struggles with PTSD and the lingering effects of his brain injury. Shadow, though clearly bonded to Jordan, remained wary of strangers and new surroundings. They were both, in their own ways, wounded. Claire became the bridge between them. Her sessions with Jordan continued, now with Shadow always present, watching, participating. He nudged Jordan when he faltered during balance exercises. He laid beside him during rest periods. He paced gently alongside the walker and later the cane. He did exactly what he had once been trained to do: support, guide, encourage. He's doing the same job he always did, Claire said softly after a particularly emotional session. He's remembered his purpose. And Jordan responded. Within a month, he had made remarkable progress. He stood longer. He walked further. He began moving without his wheelchair for short stretches. He even started jogging just a little in the early mornings, Shadow always at his side. Shadow transformed as well. His coat regained its sheen. His eyes grew brighter. His ribs disappeared under the return of lean muscle. With Kelsey's help, they worked on easing his protective instincts, helping him learn that not everyone near Jordan was a threat. The way he behaves makes perfect sense now, Kelsey explained during one of her visits. Military working dogs form intense, lifelong bonds with their handlers. Being separated after a traumatic event, it would have devastated him psychologically. The shelter officially transferred Shadow's ownership to Jordan through the Pets for Vets program, waiving all fees. News of their reunion spread. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, and the response from the community was overwhelming. A contractor volunteered to build a secure fence around Jordan's yard. A pet supply store donated a lifetime supply of food for Shadow. And Claire, she found herself at Jordan's house more often than her schedule required. The therapy sessions became shared meals, movie nights, long walks, and longer conversations. Jordan began to open up. He spoke of who he had been before his injuries, his dreams, his fears, the weight he had carried alone for far too long. Shadow recognized something in you, he told Claire one night as they sat on the patio, the shepherd patrolling the yard like a sentinel. From the moment you walked into the shelter, he knew you were someone he could trust. Claire smiled, her heart full. I think maybe we recognize something in each other, something broken, something worth healing. 6 months later, Claire arrived for what was officially Jordan's final physical therapy session. He answered the door before she could knock, standing tall and steady without any support. Shadow sat obediently at his side, proud and alert. Both of them looked healthy, strong, whole. Ready for your final evaluation? Claire asked, keeping her tone light even as emotions swirled beneath her calm exterior. The session went perfectly. Jordan exceeded every goal. He moved with confidence. His progress had not just been physical, it had been emotional, spiritual, complete. When they finished, Jordan handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, curious. "Open it." Inside was a job offer from the VA's brand new canine therapy program in Palm Desert. They were building a department to help veterans work with service dogs, designing protocols, integrating physical therapy, and offering emotional support. And they wanted Claire. "I might have dropped your name to a few people," Jordan said, his voice soft with a smile. "They're creating the position with you in mind." Claire stared at the letter, stunned by the opportunity. It was everything she had not even realized she was dreaming of. "There's one more thing," Jordan added, suddenly nervous. Shadow pressed gently against his leg, sensing the shift in his energy. "Now that you're not technically my therapist anymore," he said, his voice hesitant but hopeful, "I was wondering, would you consider having dinner with me? Without the medical notes and therapy plans?" Claire laughed, heart soaring. "I thought you'd never ask." She stepped forward, and as she did, Shadow gave a soft, approving woof. The low, contented sound of a dog who knew everything was as it should be. The once traumatized German shepherd who had cowered in the back of a kennel now stood proudly between two people he had helped bring together. His journey from the war-torn sands of Afghanistan to the quiet corners of a shelter to this moment of reconnection and healing was complete. Shadow, once deemed unadoptable, became the face of the VA's Canine Therapy Initiative. His story was featured in medical journals, captured in a heartfelt PBS documentary, and shared across the country as a testament to the healing power of animals and the bonds that war could never sever. He now visited the shelter regularly with Jordan and Claire, helping to socialize other fearful dogs, showing them, just as he had learned, that there was life, love, and purpose after trauma. Shadow had not only found his way back home, he had helped others find theirs too. a living testament to the truth that sometimes, in the most unexpected ways, the broken pieces find each other and become whole again.